Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So something that I have been thinking about a lot recently is a thing called relationship maintenance. It's connected to things like invisible labour, gendered dynamics in domestic partnerships, co-parenting, all of that stuff. And so naturally it's something that I am very keen to explore right now. And of course, completely overthink. While my relationship is very cis and very hetero, and relationship maintenance often leads to really gendered dynamics in cis and hetero relationships, it is something that does apply to all relationships, no matter what the gender makeup of them. So let's jump in and start with what relationship maintenance actually is. You're telling me I have to work on my relationship? Shock horror, relationships require you to put in work to keep them going and for everyone to be happy. When it comes to romantic relationships, mainstream media, movies, and TV sells us this narrative that all of the hard work comes before a relationship is official or established, and that once you have found your person, once there has been that declaration of love that you fought so hard for, it's just plain sailing from there, really. In fact, it's so easy, it's boring, and nobody makes movies about it until the relationship inevitably breaks down, and then you get lots of really depressing movies about that. Once again, Hollywood getting the reality of relationships all wrong, but I do love me a good rom-com and depressing divorce story as well. I love them both, what can I say? Relationship maintenance is all of the day-to-day work that goes into keeping a relationship going. These are things that help you prioritize time to spend with your partner, time to talk about how you're feeling, time to talk about, God forbid, the relationship itself and how that's going and how you feel about it. And of course, the oh-so-sexy admin keep-up of a relationship. It can include things like scheduling in date nights and arranging a babysitter, managing your joint calendar, managing your joint finances, liaising with family and in-laws about visits, buying and wrapping birthday and Christmas presents, and initiating relationship check-ins. Why don't they make movies about this? Honestly, it just sounds so exciting. Relationship maintenance is super important and actually a really positive thing. However, when the vast majority of it falls onto one partner to do, and in cis-het relationships, it is usually the responsibility of the woman to do all of this. It can lead to a lot of resentment, unbalance, and an unhealthy relationship. And so why isn't relationship maintenance always equally distributed amongst the people in the relationship? Enter the patriarchy. The system is fucked. If you didn't already know, we live in a society that has structural inequality built into it. Gender and racial pay gaps, the cost of childcare, and the fact that the UK only offers 2 weeks statutory paternity leave affects all our lives and our relationships. We often see these inequalities most obviously play out in relationships between cis men and cis women. For example, because of the complete lack of structural care, even if the mum wants to return to work after having a baby and the dad wants to be a stay-at-home dad, it might just not be financially possible. Patriarchal and capitalist structures limit our choices and force us into roles that we may not want, potentially exacerbating the burden of things like relationship maintenance. Sexism and other inequalities can seep into our relationships, like how one person always ends up being the default keeper of the calendar and keeps on top of things like birthdays and is always reminding their partner of appointments that they have. And in a relationship between a cis man and a cis woman, this very often falls to the woman because she's better at it. I say this stuff with the full awareness that this is the dynamic of my relationship, because I am better at it. But why? I told you I was going to be overthinking this. When this happens, relationship maintenance can become invisible and often gendered labour. And there's a word for that. Let's get into the mental load. You should have asked. I learned the term mental load from this book by French cartoonist Emma, and it really helped put into words my frustrations around gendered labour. The first comic, You Should Have Asked, explains how we're often told that the solution to an unequal distribution of household labour is very simple. You should just ask your partner to do more chores. Just ask them. It'll be fine. However, it is not that simple. If you're the person who is always thinking about the tasks that need to get done and asking your partner to do them, then not only are you doing your share of the tasks, but you're also managing and delegating. And this constantly having to be aware of everything that needs to get done and being the manager of the household is what the mental load refers to. As you'll expect, studies have shown that in relationships between cis men and cis women, women do the majority of the household chores. However, in households where the man takes a more equal share of the household chores, it is still the woman who is managing and delegating and shouldering that mental load. The mental load involves having to prompt your partner to do tasks, potentially more than once, or explain how to do them, and then your partner expects a reward for doing their share of the household labour. A particularly horrifying example is when this sticker chart went viral a few years ago. Daddy's sticker chart, need I say more? It gives me such an ick. As you can see, the reward for cleaning up baby vomit 6 times is a blowjob. Excellent. This is obviously awful for a whole host of reasons. You shouldn't have to reward your partner for doing basic things around the house and being an active parent. And it falls into the unfortunately common trap that cis women in relationships with cis men can find themselves in, and that's that they don't have an equal partner, they just have another child to look after. One system I've heard about that helps address this is called Fair Play, and it's a book and a conversation card game, and I haven't read it, but the general gist is that every single task, from doing the dishes to checking in with family and friends, can be split into 3 parts. C, conceive, so actually realizing that something needs to be done. P, plan, making a plan to do it. E, execute, doing it. When you split things up like this, it helps everybody take full responsibility for their tasks. In a relationship where one person is carrying the mental load, maybe you're a 50-50 split with your execution of household chores, but one person is doing all of the conceiving and all of the planning. And that's what's happening with this daddy sticker chart. He's not doing any of the conceiving or planning, only executing, and then he's getting rewards for that? I'm sorry. Not in my house. If you've fallen into these unequal patterns in your relationship, it can be really hard to break them, especially if your partner just isn't as good at it as you. But you're so much better at it than me, aka weaponized incompetence. Weaponized incompetence is when a partner exaggerates their inability to do something to shift the responsibility back to their partner to do it. For example, you ask your partner to load the dishwasher because you're about to take a work call, and after said call, you go to unload the dishwasher only to find that it hadn't been turned on because you only told them to load it, or there's no dishwasher tablet in there because they didn't know where to find them. It all ends with that feeling of, for fuck's sake, I'll just do it. And once again, your partner has gotten out of contributing to the household. And I am exhausted and furious just saying all of that. Whether your partner is aware of it or not, they are weaponizing their incompetence to get out of doing something that they see as not worth their time, i.e., they value their own time more than yours. This can happen in all kinds of relationships, no matter what the genders of the people in them, but it is really obvious in the way that we talk about cis men and parenting. When cis men look after their own children, we still talk about it like they are babysitting, rather than parenting. This is a trope that comes up time and time again in our media. I was recently watching The Letdown on Netflix, which is an Australian sitcom about new parents, and they did the classic episode of mum is away and busy, and so dad is left with baby all by himself and has no idea what to do. And that's the joke. That's what is meant to be funny. And I'm like, how are we not beyond this humor anymore? It's boring. It is so tiring to see that we have not moved on past that narrative in stuff that is being made today by seemingly progressive feminist people. Thanks, I hate it. But even if you do have your partner on side, those pesky structural inequalities can still get in the way. My job has more flexibility than Dan's, so it makes sense that I'm the person that the childminder rings in case there is a problem. However, I know some people where the kid's school will still ring the mum, even if it's the dad's number that is down as the person to contact. Why? Why, people? So we already talked a bit about structural inequalities, but it's time for a classic anti-capitalist rant. Leo Tolstoy was a productivity guru. Now, if you watch my other YouTube channel, you know that I am a fan of productivity and organization content. However, there is a certain brand of productivity advice that really annoys me because it completely ignores structural inequalities. Leo Tolstoy is held up as an inspiration by many productivity gurus. He's one of the most famous authors of the 19th century and wrote prolifically, all whilst having 13 children. And these productivity gurus love to mention that. But when people suggest to follow Tolstoy's advice, it's often without the caveat that he managed to do what he did because he had a wife who was there to look after their children and him, manage their household, and act as his secretary and agent for free. She was not paid. She copied out the entire text of War and Peace by hand 7 times. Where is Sophia's credit? Why aren't the productivity gurus finding her an inspiration? It's all very well to quote Tolstoy's advice of only do one thing at a time, or wake at 5 o'clock and go to bed no later than 10 o'clock. His advice just doesn't work if you don't have an unpaid live-in nanny, cleaner, cook, and assistant. The 40-hour workweek was based on the idea that every worker is a white, able-bodied, cis, straight man who has somebody at home doing all of that unpaid labour for him. Which isn't only completely untrue in today's modern society, but it's also made even harder by the current cost of living crisis. Our society still devalues work that is traditionally seen as women's work. Household labour and relationship maintenance is unpaid work. And even paid work that is more associated with women, like nursing or teaching, is undervalued and paid less. So it's pretty obvious if you think about it that domestic and parenting roles can bring a ton of gendered stuff with them. But maybe it's not so obvious that sex can involve a lot of gendered labour and relationship maintenance. What, you want me to use a condom? So I also really want to talk about sex maintenance, which, you guessed it, in relationships between cis men and cis women, it often falls on the woman. In her book, Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again, Catherine Angel writes that great sex doesn't always come naturally is a useful insight, but it is overwhelmingly women who are expected to spend time and resources on this kind of work. Yes, Catherine. Think about it. Whilst it's often on the guy in a relationship between a cis man and a cis woman to provide a condom, it is often women and other people of marginalized genders who have a lot more work that is expected of them to do in order to have satisfying and pleasurable sexual experiences. Who are the vast majority of sex toys, sexual wellness platforms and apps, courses and products aimed at? Women. Sex maintenance can look like initiating conversations about sex, introducing want, will, won't lists, remembering to stock up on and bring lube, condoms, and sex toys, advocating for your own pleasure, educating your partner about how your body works, and scheduling sex. And because of all the cis hetero patriarchal scripts that we're fed about how sex should look, it's often women and people of marginalized genders who have to put in the work and effort if they want to have a good time and get off. Also, couples that share household chores and the mental load report having more satisfying sex lives. Which is not surprising because it's hard to get turned on by someone who you've been babying all week, who you don't feel supported by and have grown a deep resentment for. In the context of my relationship, I do most of the sex maintenance, but also my job is in sex. And so I'm like, how much is it to do with that versus how much is it to do because I'm the woman? And then I just overthink everything and feel really funny about it. And that leads us on to, is there such a thing as free choice under the patriarchy? With a lot of the roles that I take on in my relationship, I'm often wondering, am I doing this because I am defaulting to the woman's role, or Or am I doing this because it is something that I genuinely really love and I'm good at? What I'm saying is that we don't make our choices in a vacuum. My love of organization is part of who I am, and I do not want to change that. But when it comes to my relationship with Dan, I'm aware that I might be better at some of these things because I'm expected to be. Dan is the one to take out the bins and put up frames, and whilst I love me an IKEA furniture build, Dan's the one who's changing light bulbs. There is nothing inherently gendered about these roles and tasks, and as long as we're both happy and playing to our strengths, then it should all be fine. But obviously, that doesn't stop me overthinking about it all the time. However, we now also have a child together, and we want to make sure that we're raising Rowan to know that even if we do fall into some stereotypically gendered roles in our relationship, it's something that we are choosing to do and we have discussed and isn't the default for all relationships. It's important to me that he knows that there's no such thing as girls' work or boys' work, and that if he's not a boy or a girl, then guess what? There's work for you too. Unfortunately, being non-binary doesn't exempt you from household chores. I'm not sure if my choices will ever be free of the influence of the patriarchy, but I hope that one day my children's or my grandchildren's or my great-great-great-great-grandchildren's choices will be. So let's talk about what we can do to get us closer to that day. Sending you this video is labor. I think one of the biggest steps towards making things in our relationships and our society more equal is to make all of that invisible labor visible. And that needs to happen on a societal systemic level and in our relationships too. Campaigning for free childcare and equal shared parental leave. Working to close the gender pay gap and get rid of stereotypes around women's work and men's work and how we value them. But obviously no one can single-handedly dismantle the patriarchy and capitalism. So whilst we're collectively working on that, there are some things that we can do in our relationships. And yes, making invisible labor visible is work. Sending your partner this video to start a conversation about relationship maintenance is work. That is relationship maintenance. Asking your partner to simply just talk about how you want your relationship to look, let alone actually making any of the changes that you want, is labor, is relationship maintenance. This is you taking on even more of the mental load, which can feel really unfair when what you're trying to do is spread it out a bit. However, a good partner should want to address the balance in your relationship, and they should want to make your life easier. If your partner has sent you a link to this video, they may be trying to tell you something, and now is not the time to get defensive, but remain open. It is not a you versus them scenario in the relationship. It is you together as a team versus capitalism and the patriarchy. Being explicit about these things, even if it feels awkward, even if it feels like they're just minor annoyances, will help you start building a relationship that works for both of you. Interestingly, women who have divorced their partners but still co-parent with them say that it is really refreshing not to be shouldering the mental load alone. If a child spends half their week living with one parent and half their week living with another, then both parents have to step up and take on their fair share of the parenting and responsibilities. I'm not saying that everything has to be a 50-50 split. Sometimes that is logistically and biologically just not possible. It's totally fine to play to your strengths and capabilities as long as everybody is happy with that. And if you can't get to a point where you're both happy with how things are divided and you still feel like you're doing most of the relationship maintenance, maybe it isn't the right relationship for you. These are also absolutely conversations that you can have at the beginning of a relationship and when you are dating. You can mention things hypothetically rather than making it specifically about you. And you can reference things like different media or even this YouTube video. Bring it up and see what they think and say about it. The earlier you talk about these things, the easier it is to not end up with one person doing all of the relationship maintenance and invisible labor. By actually talking about it, you avoid just assuming what roles you're going to fall into. These conversations aren't necessarily going to be very sexy or easy, but they are the main way to make sure that you and your partner are on the same page, and they can actually lead to greater intimacy in your relationship. So what do we think? Is everything fucked? Is it even possible to undo a lot of these gendered expectations and social conditioning? Is there such a thing as an equal relationship? One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is as a reminder to people that you are not crazy if you're experiencing some of these things and this imbalance in your relationship. It can just make you think that you're going a bit mad and you're like, is this normal? What's going on? Why do I hate my partner? help. Structural misogyny is everywhere, along with ableism, white supremacy, and cis heteronormativity. We can't overthrow the patriarchy overnight, but we can start to have these conversations. Maybe it's time to schedule a relationship check-in with your partner and see where you're both at. What things do you use to maintain your relationship? Please let me know in the comments some of your relationship maintenance strategies, or if you have any tips and tricks of how to have this conversation with partners. I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!